Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today, we're going to be looking at content marketing, establishing a personal brand, and growing your sales. So, of course, this is going to be a long episode, so strap in. Now, first off, let's define the terms so that we know exactly what it is that we are talking about. Well, content marketing is a form of marketing where you put out, let's define content first of all. Now, for the purposes of sales and marketing, every single time you hear content, not just on this podcast, but usually over on the internet, content just means photos, videos, texts, blog articles, podcast, whatever it is. Anything that can be created on the internet, we'll call that content. Now, content marketing is when you take all those sorts of things, video, audio, or text, you try and put some value behind it. And the whole idea is that by putting out valuable content over time, people will interact, people will engage, they will come to know, like, and trust you. And so when people are ready, when they are finally in that situation where they might need your product or your service, you are going to be the one that they will turn to. So that's the idea behind content marketing. Now, content marketing is not it's not anything new. It's been around for a while. Whether in traditional media or social media, content marketing is a thing, and content marketing has been here for a very long time. So, what content marketing means, in simple terms, nowadays is that people are going to be putting out useful content. How will I put it now? Okay. Maybe a decade ago, when blogging was popular, people would be putting out blogs. Okay, so let's say a decade ago, this wouldn't have been a podcast, this would have been a blog. But either way, the theory would still be the same because what I'm doing actually is content marketing. So I'm putting out a podcast. The podcast is valuable. People come here and they feel like they know me, they feel like they trust me, they feel like we're in a relationship. When people are ready for consulting services on certain things, they reach out to me. So that is content marketing. Now, remember, I said today we're talking about content marketing, establishing a brand, and growing your sales. So obviously, this whole thing about content marketing has some really interesting implications for building a personal brand. And I think that's the reason why lots of people nowadays are drawn to podcasting and other forms of long form content. Because people have this desire to establish a personal brand, and they can see that people who do pretty well, consistently putting out videos, consistently putting out podcasts, consistently putting out infographics or whatever, as a form of content marketing, they become a personal brand, in quote. And so lots of people are drawn to it. And I think that's the reason why people have been reaching out to me. Listeners of the podcast have been reaching out to me to say, how far I want to start a podcast, I want to build a brand, blah, blah, blah. So there have been lots of questions. So quite frankly, that's the reason why I'm making today's episode, because people are still reaching out to say, I want to build a personal brand. I want to build a personal brand. I want to start a podcast, blah, 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 all that whole, everything, all join. Now, of course, you guys already know what my opinion is. I say that this whole thing around chasing a brand is a distraction, and I advise people not to go there in the beginning. But I'm not going to bring up that whole argument today. So let me just stick to the script. Let me just stick to the script because people are reaching out to me to say how far I want to start a podcast, or I've already started a podcast, or I'm trying to grow a personal brand. And luckily, some of you are beginning to get it, that the whole point of all this is sales. Let me repeat. The whole point of all this is sales. The whole point of all this is revenue. People don't create content for content's sake. Anybody that you see that is dancing around on TikTok, they're not just dancing for dancing's sake. They're dancing because, well, if they're serious, they have found a way to make dancing bring money for them. So at the end of the day, money is at the end of this thing. So whenever people are talking content marketing, the goal is sales. The goal is money. If somebody is talking podcasting, the goal is sales. The goal is money. If somebody is dancing on TikTok, the goal is sales. The goal is money. Don't lose sight of that. Sometimes I worry that too many of you are being distracted. Like maybe some of you listen to this podcast and you think, oh, podcasting is cool. I think you guys are being seduced by the cool factor. That's why too many people want a podcast. All right. Anyway, so I've defined the key terms. I've defined content marketing. No need to define personal brand. Okay, let's just define personal brand. Let's just say personal brand is your reputation. And then, okay, I've stressed that the whole part of this thing is to grow your sales. Now, what I'm going to do next is this. Because remember, I said folks have been reaching out to me. I want to start a podcast. I've already started a podcast. So I want to use someone who has already started a podcast. And what we're going to do is we're going to critique how he has implemented his podcast, hoping that those of you who are thinking, those of you who are also seduced by starting a podcast, I'm hoping that you guys might be able to learn one or two lessons from this. Or please, the overall lesson that I want anybody who's listening now to learn is that we're not creating content for content's sake. It's about sales. It's about money. It's about revenue. And for those of you who've been listening for the last 2-3 weeks, you will remember the time when I came up here to talk about this other individual who wanted to start a podcast. And I say, how far with the money? He said, don't disturb me about the money. I'll take care of that. Only for him to come back later on and say, okay, these are the kind of ideas he wants for the money. So basically, what I'm trying to say is, even if you say, I just want a podcast, I don't care about the money, last, you still come back and say, okay, what can I do about money? So it's always about the money. We can't run away from it. Money is not dirty. Money is necessary. Money is a medium of exchange. Wanting money is not a bad thing. Chasing money is not a bad thing. You need money. Nobody can live without money on this earth. You cannot. It's unfortunate. But economics is a thing. Resources are limited. Resources are scarce. So if you want to acquire stuff, if you want to do things, if you want to implement things, you need money. So you people listening to this podcast, stop being shy about this thing. It's not a shyness something. It's a necessary something. So let's stop being coy about this. All right. So now we're going to critique the way that somebody implemented a podcast. So how will I do this thing now? Anyway, so this guy now, he started a new podcast. I'm not going to call his name. Let's just call him, what name shall we call him now? Yeah, let's call him Mr. T. Yeah, because let's just call him Mr. T. So Mr. T has come up with a new podcast. And what Mr. T wants to do with this podcast is he wants his podcast to be, he's trying to build a distribution network. That's the idea behind the podcast, because he's in the financial services space and he's going to be coming up with financial products in the future. And so he wants to be able to sell the products using the podcast. Now, first of all, this is where I'll clap for Mr. T. I'll clap for him very, very well. Very, very well. Remember, I said at the top of the episode, if there's any lesson that I want people to learn today, I want you to learn that, look, it's always about the money. Now, even if you don't learn any other lesson and then you close the podcast at this point, but at least you know that it's about the money, no problem. I'm okay. I'm happy. So he recognizes that it is about the money. So he's being strategic. The reason why he's creating a podcast is because he's looking for a distribution network. When he starts selling financial products, there has to be a place where that'll be connecting him to potential audiences. And so he's creating a podcast. And so for that, Mr. T, I clap for you. You're on the right path. Then he also wants to try some ideas around community building. He wants to build a professional community. He wants to secure brand partnerships. Let's see, what else? All those sorts of things. And then, of course, he also wants to build a personal brand. And like I say, anytime I hear personal brand, my head will just be scratching. Because I think people are putting the cart before the horse when you keep talking about personal brand, personal brand. But anyway, but at least he's thinking. The podcast has a purpose. There's some strategy behind it. So I guess lesson number one should be this. If you want to engage in content marketing, any form of long-form content creation, whether it's putting up videos or doing Instagram lives, Instagram reels, sorry, not Instagram reels, what's it called? Instagram live and all these sorts of things. Maybe doing it every week or every two days or every three days or whatever. Or you want to create a podcast, just remember that money should be okay. Anyway, I've mentioned money too much. Let me just go on. So first of all, now for Mr. T, I wanted to know what his goal was for making the podcast because, like I say, too many people are just seduced by the fact that content is cool. Because, podcasting and long form content is cool because you look at somebody who's creating Instagram reels and they're getting thousands of views, and it's sexy, and you want that. Or you hear that I now have 3,400 and something subscribers on Spotify, and it sounds sexy, and you want that. You also want subscribers as well. And so because of that, you now reach out and say, I want to start a podcast. So I wanted to know his goals. And like I said, he's thinking straight. He wants to create distribution for financial products that he's going to sell later on. And then he also spoke about some networking things, things like that. And like I said, we can clap for Mr. T. He's in the right place. But however, there are a few things that came up, or rather, a few things that I've thought about after having this chat with him, and I want to share on the podcast. Now, the first thing that I want to point out is I want to use podcasting as a networking tool. And there are a couple of you who want to use podcasting as a networking tool, but you do not know how to use podcasting as a networking tool. You've not given it much thought. You just assume that if you start a podcast, then the networking will automatically follow. And that is not the case. Now, there are different kinds of podcast formats. I'm sure you guys have noticed that what I do, this is a solo show, meaning I come over here, I grab the microphone, and I'm spitting value over the course of 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 1 hour, no matter how long or no matter how short. So this is just one format, and that is the solo host format. Then there's also another format for podcasting, which is the guest interview format, and it looks as if the guest interview one is much more popular. Now, if you want to use podcasting as a networking tool, you actually have to be using the guest interview format. The reason why I'm mentioning this is that Mr. T has started a podcast, and he said he wants to use podcasts for networking. But Mr. T's podcast is a solo show. The two don't blend. If you are a solo host, like me, the chief benefit that you're going to get from having a podcast is expert positioning. So because you're the only person on the mic, because you're the only person talking about your unique frameworks, your own unique approaches, things like that, people will be exposed to you as an expert. And so if you want to use your podcast for networking, you should not be having a solo show. I repeat, if I, Tavishima, want to use this podcast to network, I should not have a solo show. I should do a show where I start interviewing people, where I have guests. So that's one thing I want to point out. So any of you who is thinking of starting a podcast, if you want to use it as a networking tool, please go and start looking for guests. Now, the thing about the guest format is this. Let's say you publish once a week. That's for a month. So you have 4 guests. Then 4 times 12, what is that? Is that 50? I don't know. 4 times 12, 4 times 2, 8. 4 times 1, but that's 48. Okay, good. That's 48. So now if you look at this, the simple mechanics, if you want to have a podcast where you publish an episode weekly, you're going to have to talk to 48 guests. So can you see that already by simple mathematics, you already see that you're building quite a network around you because you're interacting with other people. Now, I, on the other hand, I have 1,300 and something episodes, but it's all me. So yes, maybe in a sense, I have some sort of community or things like that. But the thing is, my podcast is not a networking tool. You want to use your podcast as a networking tool, make sure you interview guests. So that's something that Mr. T should think about. If he's serious about networking, he has to change the format. Then another thing that people forget, or rather lots of people don't know, is this. When you're using your podcast as a networking tool and you're interviewing people, you actually should be interviewing people who might have a need for your product or your service. Because networking for networking's sake will make you tired. You will have published 52 episodes over the course of a year. You would have interviewed 52 people, I'll be 48 people. Sorry, okay, I did my math wrong. Okay, there are 52 weeks in a year. Sorry, forgive me, I did my math wrong. Okay, so you would have published 52 episodes in a year. You would have interviewed 52 people. By the end of the day, you wouldn't have generated any sales. And then networking for networking's sake, it gets boring, it gets tiring. So when you interview people, you actually should be interviewing people who might need your product, who might need your service, so that after the interview, where you guys are chatting and all whatnot, some business might come out of it. So Mr. T, he's in the financial space, wealth advisory space, stuff like that. So he actually should be interviewing people who are in need of financial products, wealth advisory products, stuff like that. Maybe invite someone, you talk about business growth, you talk about their business, blah 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 blah. Maybe during the interview, you point out how certain principles of how some wealth advisory principles or frameworks can help them grow their business or grow their investments or grow their whatever. By the time you're done with the interview, eventually you guys will start chatting off camera, and the guest will now ask you, so what do you do? That is where you'll be able to tell them, oh, I'm into wealth advisory, blah, blah, blah. We have this investment product, that investment product. The person says, oh, really? And then you get some money from that. So, summary. If you're like Mr. T and you want to use podcasting as a networking tool, do not start a podcast like mine. Interview guests. If you're interviewing guests and you're publishing one a week, you would have networked with 52 people by the end of the year. Then, money is important. Money is important. Don't be shy. Money is important. The people that you interview on your podcast, are people who might need your product or your service. So you interview them, you give them some value, you share your airwaves with them, you get to them talk about themselves, talk about their business, let them feel cool, let them feel, whatever. And then when you will get off the podcast, of course, relationship building, we'll now go talk one-on-one. And eventually the person will ask you, what do you do? You get a chance to sell something. So if you have a podcast, you interview 52 people. And at the end of the day, out of those 52, if you do business with 10 of them, is it bad? It's not bad. It's better than people who have podcasts and who podcast for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years and are not making any money from the podcast. By the way, that's one reason why people fade. They'll start a podcast, they'll say it's not about the money. Then after 3 years, they're like, why am I even continuing with this thing itself? This thing is a burden. And then they stop. Okay, then Mr. T also wants to use podcasting as a means of community building. Oh, sorry. By the way, if you're discovering this podcast for the first time, my name is Tavishima Ayede. I'm a former lawyer turned business consultant. And what I do over here on the podcast is I like to solve business problems. So if you'd love to connect with me, just like Mr. T did, you can call, send me a text message or a WhatsApp message on 080-6466-2140. Now, if this is your first time listening, you think that this is a show about podcasting. Actually, it's not a show about podcasting. It's a podcast about sales. It's just that apart from Mr. T, people who have been reaching out to me, last year, up in the new year, there's lots of people saying, I want to start a podcast. So I'm just making today's podcast episode as a resource for these people so that they can think through certain things clearly. The first thing I've stressed is, look, it's always about the money, whether we like it or not. So we should be thinking about these things. This podcast that I'm starting, what's the whole point? And when and how does money factor into the conversation? Into the equation. All right. Then Mr. T also says that he wants to use the podcast to build a community. Very good. Now, I remember why I said I wanted to discuss this one. And it's because lots of people say they want to build a community. They want to build a community. But people do not understand what a community means. Some people look at me and they look at the fact that I have over 3,400 or something subscribers, and they think I have a community. Actually, I don't. My subscriber base, whether on Spotify or whether on YouTube, they are not a community. They are a subscriber base, or they are a followership base, or they are a whatever, but it's not a community. Because a community is a group of people who talk to each other. What happens on a podcast is I come and talk at you. So it's not a community. In other words, if I disappear today, everything will fall apart. If I decide I'm no longer podcasting after this episode, this everything will scatter. That is not a community. A community is when people start talking to each other. If I successfully build a community, even if I remove myself from the equation, the thing will continue. Some people might say, "Oh, Tabeshima is out of the equation, no problem." But we don't they relate, so let's go and do our own thing. The community will live on its own. So, if Mr. T is serious about creating a community, and if you want to start a podcast because you want to create a community, you had better think about ways where you can create opportunities for people to start talking to each other. So if you have a podcast and then you create a Facebook group, for instance, and people are in the Facebook group, and you're able to come up with a good moderation strategy so that people are talking to each other, good, then you have a community. Now, this is one strategy that has been used by, so I can't remember the guy's name. But anyway, the guy has a podcast and then the guy has a Facebook group. But then in the Facebook group, instead of him talking all the time, he encourages people to ask questions. Because he noticed that the new people in the group, when they ask questions, before the guy can answer, some of the senior members will say, "Have you tried this? Have you tried this? Have you done this?" And it was giving value to the group. Now, the senior members of the group who are replying are saying, "Have you tried this? Do it like this, do it like this." Those people are now getting status. Those people are now getting some level of recognition, some importance. And so it got the dynamic going. So the guy has the podcast and he has the Facebook group, but he's not in the Facebook group every day because he knows that the community, they relate. Everybody, like people are talking amongst themselves. Sometimes the guy will show for 2 weeks and, nobody, how will I put it? Nobody they vex. It's not a problem. The fact that he didn't show in the group for 2 weeks actually is not a problem. Things are going on fine. That is a community. So think about that. If you want to use podcasting as a community building tool, then from more about the conversations I had with Mr. T, let's see. Okay, making money from the podcast. Okay, good. He wants to sell products and services. Okay, good. That makes sense. But then people who want to make money from a podcast, they forget that content marketing is a long-term strategy because you have to establish thought leadership first. People need to see that you are the guy or that you are the very babe. It is only when they see you are the guy, you are the very babe, they feel like they know you, that then they will start giving you money. If from day one, my very first podcast episode, I started trying to collect money from you guys, people will not be here. People will say, "Who is this guy? Who is this bagger?" A lot of you would have left. It's because you've been hanging around and you see the value that I provide, especially those of you who reach out and have the free sessions where I give you free business advice. You guys hang around. And then eventually some of you say, "You know what? We have this problem. I'm opening this store. I'm hiring a new team. I'm this, I'm that, and that. I want you to come and consult for us." It's a long-term play. So you're not going to be able to charge money from day one when you start publishing the podcast, which is why I keep saying, for those of you who are seduced by the podcast, it sounds cool. You're seduced by podcasting. Money is important. We have to start thinking about this thing, and you have to recognize that money is not going to come from day one, except if you start interviewing guests and you interview guests who might need your product or your service. In that way, okay, you can make money from your podcast in the short term. So let's see. Okay, this is already 30 minutes, and honestly, the conversation is still plenty. Okay, let me just leave it like this. Let me cap it like this so that this won't be a very long episode. So I'll come back and then I'll address some other things that came up in the conversation between Mr. T and I. So let's just say this is going to be a two-parter or a three-parter. Okay, so yeah, we're wrapping up part one now about content marketing, establishing a personal brand, and growing your sales. So the key lessons that I wanted you guys to take away from this, if you have been seduced buy a podcast and you want to start one just like Mr. T, remember that money is key. So be strategic about this thing. When is money going to come into the equation and how? We need to be strategic. Then some of the key ideas that we've discussed about this. Let's see what else. Okay, Mr. T spoke about networking. Yes, podcasting can be a networking tool, but if you want to use your podcast to network, don't do solo show. There are too many of you who say, I want to network, and then you're the only person on the mic. If you want to network and you want to use podcasting to do that, my friend, go and set up a two-person something and have two people from day one and start doing guest interview. My own recommendation, interview people who might need your product or your service. Because after you interview 52 people in a year, because it is hard to be sending phone call back and forth. Are you okay? Are you ready? Shall we record on Monday? Can we record on Wednesday? Can we record on Friday? All that back and forth. You go through all that wahala, 52 interviews, and then you're not making a single kobo. It's hard. So, at least interview people who might be users of your product or your service so you can make some change. Like I said, if you interview 52 people, 10 of them become your clients. It's not bad. It's not bad at all, at all, at all. Then, when it comes to making money from the podcast, have realistic expectations. If you're the only person on the microphone, it's going to be a long-term play. You are not going to make money in the first year. You won't make money in the first 2 years, maybe even the first 3 years. It's going to be a long-term play because you have to establish know, like, and trust. You also have to establish thought leadership. These dynamics, unfortunately, take time. So if you want to make money in the short term, it has to be an interview, something, and then you're interviewing people who might need your product or your service, or maybe you can come up with a gist podcast, like I said, what I said, and the honest bunch and stuff like that. But then you have to be very entertaining, and in that one, the gameplay is going to be advertising, making money from advertising. But even then, it's still going to be a long-term play because it's not as if I said what I said and the honest bunch and all these other people like Tea with Tay and all that. It's not as if they started collecting sponsorship money from day one. All right, so that's it. Let me just wrap it up. Let me upload this podcast sharp. If I can, I'll come back and just do part 2 this night, and then maybe part 3 tomorrow. So that's it. Now, if you're listening to the podcast and you'd love to connect, call, send me a text message or a WhatsApp message on 080-6466-2140. So, excuse me. So, yeah, I've been calling out folks, especially for the whole month of February, people who want to start businesses, but they're not sure which business to start, or they have 3-4 ideas. So reach out to me. Let's help you select the right idea. Let's help validate the idea to show that there's market demand. And then let us also create a selling strategy, a selling framework, so that people come back and buy again and again. And also so that they refer their friends, their family members, and their associates, because we're looking for referral money here. Then, if you've been listening to the podcast, just like Mr. T, and you are being seduced by the allure of podcasting, and you want to start a podcast, yeah, I can help you out as well. So just reach out 080-6466-2140. I'm okay with giving free advice, so there's no problem with that. Just make sure you state it clearly when you reach out to me. Just say it. You're looking for free business advice. That's not a problem. If we chat, you get value from the free business advice, and you want us to hook up a consulting session, we can. So, yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I will catch you all on the part 2 of this podcast episode, on the part 2 of this podcasting, brand building, and growing your sales. What will I call it now? Anyway, you get the point. I'll catch you guys soon.